agrarian-based society, then from the Hindu perspective, grains are the main food, if you will, and karma is thought to be transferred through the grains. So the wonderful thing about Krishna Bhakti is that at this very baseline, if you will, we need to eat to survive, kind of the bottom line, that's this very bottom line of our material existence can be purified, which obviously would have implications for the rest of our life. If you purify at the bottom line, well, you got their purification at the foundation, if you will. And so the idea is that by transforming the food that one eats through the ritual of offering to Bhagwan, that act engaged in for sustenance, which is a taking from the environment, the taking is taken out of it because you've offered it to Bhagwan. So at the bottom line, also we could say we're takers in this world. It's a world of karma, is the realm of exploitation. So we take that out at the very, very baseline, if you will, of our existence through offering the food that we consume, and in ideal sense of a devotee's life, he or she is thought not to eat because everything that is consumed has been offered, and instead of eating, one is honoring the remnants of what Bhagavan has eaten by way of eating them. But eating in this kind of a theological sense is transcended. And the implications of eating, which is taking, which is the baseline of our existence. We have to take to live. So now we're giving to live. And at such a basic, foundational level. Just some thoughts in general. That said, I think it's fair to conclude that all prasadam is not the same. It depends on the what's being offered, with what measure of devotion it's being offered, and so on. So sometimes the term is used pretty loosely. I think that there are a lot of instances in which devotees in real life situations, even in Gaur Leela, are eating in certain instances where there isn't a formal offering. Another way to talk about that is that it's thought that the Kanishthadhikari offers the food at the altar with all the rituals and prescribed practices, mantras, and so on and so forth. Whereas the Madhyamadhikari, the intermediate devotee, is consumed by a life of devotion, rather than taking time out from one's life for devotion. In the case of the neophyte, the Kanishthadhikari, who needs to go to the temple to see God. As I've said before, Some people say, why does God need a temple? We could say he doesn't, but you need a temple because he's everywhere, but you can't see him anywhere. So we're going to put him here so you can see him here, go here, relate to him as one should. And eventually you'll start to see him everywhere. The universality of the deity will be revealed. So the intermediate devotee, his or her life is consumed by bhakti. And so there's some sense that everything that she does, that devotee, is done in the consciousness of an offering. So there may not be a formal offering required. And then there's another idea that the Uttamadhikari accepts whatever is given to him as Krishna's supplying. So it's Krishna's prasadam. He only sees Krishna everywhere in everything. So if someone supplies him food, he thinks that you may be the instrument, madam, but Krishna is sending him. And that's the consciousness in which he lives. So the whole world becomes, everything becomes Krishna's grace. If you will, prasada means grace, mercy. So obviously there are different ways of thinking about that, and different, like the offerings in Jagannath Puri are thought to be special because there they have the deity of Jagannath, and there's 64 offerings a day, and there's, I don't know how many kitchens there are in that temple. There's like lots of them, maybe over 50 kitchens. So there's like all the cooking is a real big thing there for Jagannath. So that's prasad is thought to be special. So much is put into that. So there, it's taken in, brought distant places and given, and so on. And some devotees, at one point in Raghunath Das Goswami's life, he would eat only what had been offered to Jagannath, and was brought out from the temple by patrons or devotees, and then who gave him as a beggar a little bit here, a little bit there, and that would be his meal. So that's an instance of living on prasadam and not eating, so to speak. But that's a high standard. To go further than that, he used to get money from his parents, and then he would hold big festivals and cook and invite all the devotees in Jagannath Puri, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would serve them. And then he gave that up, and he just became a beggar. And then after that, he gave up the begging, and he used to go to the area where the pots were cleaned. And when there was some leftover, it was given to the cows, a little bit here and there. And then whatever was left over from that, he would take it and clean it, and he would eat it. And then when Mahaprabhu heard about that, he went and found him and snatched a piece of rice from his hand and said, again, you're having festivals and not inviting me? So that, different levels of prasad, but it's kind of what your question is about. But can an impure person offer to Krishna, and are his impurities carried into the offering, or in some measure are they removed? I would think that we would conclude the latter. So his devotion, her devotion may be mixed, and it may have less power, so to speak, than an offering really done conscientiously with love and so forth, maybe out of routine. Something's better than nothing, but I don't think there's anything negative that we can derive from such. And to extend this concept, of course, across culturally, there's a strong sense in, I think, most religious traditions of, like in the Christian tradition, they say, say grace around the table, thank God for the bounty, and so forth. It's not quite the same, but connected. Hmm? Um, so I think that another way to look at your experience is that perhaps is that in the context of one's own purification, things may stir up. Hmm? So if you decide to clean your room, it can get pretty dirty when you lift the rug and oh my God, and then you sweep and it's all over. So maybe something like that. Stirred up some things that now have to be, that you didn't know were there, and thoughts, and then, oh, and then you have to let them go. Mahaprasad ki jai. Okay?
Yeah, I think that's why I wanted to say that I don't want to blame the prasad. I just want to find
Yeah.
the reason. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, very nice comprehensive answer there. Eric, you have to unmute yourself.
Morning, Maharaj, Dandavats, Hare Krishna. So my question this time is regarding a quote from Srila Sridhar Maharaj that I was reading the other day from one of his books regarding independence and omnipotence of Krishna. It's just to read a little bit of it to preface the question. God is not a constitutional king, but he is an autocrat. To work for an autocrat is the highest conception of sacrifice. What degree of selflessness and courage is required to work for an autocrat, a despot, a liar who is up to anything? Not only that, his normal position is such. It is not a temporary temperament, but is his eternal inner nature. Krishna is an autocrat because law emanates from him. An autocrat is above law. And so this was a bit confusing to me, or I guess trying to understand this, because at the same time of Krishna's omnipotence or independence, it seems like in most traditions, including the Gaudiya tradition or understanding of God, that he also has other characteristics like being omnibenevolent and being merciful, and has sort of like in a sense, like certain characteristics of his that kind of guide what he does, but I guess not because he's forced to, but because he's supreme and it's his personality or nature, like being like those are aspects of like the definition of God. So, but this quote, at least to me, it seemed like it was indicating that his independence is paramount and could even potentially transgress or contradict the other aspects of his character. And I guess it seems like it could potentially open the door to other theological complications regarding like logical contradiction, or at least apparent logical contradictions about like God's character, so to speak. So I guess I just wanted to get your input on this topic and how to understand it properly.
Well, in one sense, Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj may be implicitly making a comparison between some other religious traditions, where, for example, in some sectors of Christianity, there seems to be a strong idea that there's God and that God has a competitor in the form of Satan, and sometimes Satan wins, I guess, and sometimes God wins, which is very foreign to my thinking, and it seems to bring into question the omnipotence of the Godhead, that he has a competitor. So comparatively, Krishna has no competitor. He's omnipotent. He's independent. He can do whatever he likes. Yes, he is above the law because he makes the laws, as Sridhar Maharaj said. But that said, the land, if you will, in which he lives, that is the country of love. the domain of love. So in love, as I've said at times, where there's love, there are no laws. Where there are laws, there is no love. Or to the extent to which there are laws, love is lacking. To the extent to which there is love, there's no need for law. Prabhupada had an idea that the laws by which his society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, would be governed were love and trust. So if those things are in place, then you don't need to make all kinds of laws and regulations to control people and so forth. So Braj Leela, where Swami Bhagavan resides, is a domain of love, and there's no need for laws there. He's beyond even the Upanishadic dictums and so forth. However, what is that realm? It is the interaction between himself and his devotees, between himself and Radha, for example. And there we see that while he is above the law, he is controlled by love. And in one sense, as the ultimate autocrat, he controls Krishna, others, by love rather than by law. In other expansions of himself, they may be presided by law and so forth. But Braj Krishna, we want to say that in love there is the greatest power and force. So he is. Now, when we say that he's ruled by love, this doesn't bring in his omnipotence into question, because that love is his own internal Shakti. It's called his Swarup Shakti. So it's the Shakti that defines him, so to speak, his own character and person and so forth. So he who is omnipotent is at the same time controlled by love. And that does not, I want to say, interfere with his independence with regard to the world where love is lacking. So when we speak about the omnipotence of God, we're kind of speaking of it in relation to this world. He can't be controlled by it. He cannot be, he's not governed by it. He's independent of it. Nothing in this world can, there's no Satan, he has no competitor. Whereas in his own personal life and realm, well, that's another thing. Now, the Maya Shakti is not present there, but his own Swarup Shakti, which makes possible the two for love, the object of love and love itself. Has to be two, so that makes it possible. And under that influence, then we can say that he who is omnipotent is controlled. He who is the original guru becomes a disciple in the dance Prema Vidyalaya, the school of love, the dance of Radha. So I don't know, if I answered your question, not sure what it was. You just kind of wanted me to talk, I think, about omnipotence and what does that help, or is there, maybe I missed something?
Oh yes, that helps a lot. I guess to be more concise, I guess I just wanted to understand, like, Does Krishna's independence or omnipotence mean that he can like contradict his aspects of being merciful or omnibenevolent or things like that? Yeah.
Something like, kind of, it's a little different, but it reminds me of the question of if God is all potent, all omnipotent, then can he make a stone heavier than he can lift? That's kind of what you're asking. Right?
Yes, yeah, more or less.
Prabhupada answered that question. He said, yes, he can do that, and then he will lift it. He can make a stone heavier than he can lift, and then he will lift it also. So it's kind of like, don't overthink it here. There's another thought, and I can't bring it to fruition. It's related, a reference, but you could say he can do anything, but I think Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj said, well, the laws of nature come from him. He could change the laws of nature. So laws are flexible and subject to a lawmaker. So what we think is impossible is not impossible for him. But then, that requires to understand that going to another realm where impossible is not found in the dictionary. What may be logically impossible doesn't have to pertain to one who is transcendent to logic and the limitations of logic. So we want to confine God within the limitations of what we logically find to be impossible in our particular realm of experience, which is, very provincial. It's not the whole picture by any means. So the Shastra tells us that some things are inconceivable, which means that there's in love itself is. I mean, love is not logical in a sense. It would be logical that if you give, which is the heart of loving, you would have less, but you end up having more. So it's a very impoverished idea that everything should conform to one's reasoning capacity. Therefore, we have trans-rational practices. Chanting is not, it's unreasonable to chant, but the chanting itself is not a rational exercise, it's a trans-rational exercise. The descriptions of Krishna and Krishna Lila are also put in words that, like poetry, and so that they seek to express things that logical and kind of scientific mathematical language can't express. So, yeah, hope that helps.
Oh yes, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, Rajabhumi, you need to unmute yourself to ask your question.
Respects and well wishes to you, Guru Maharaj. Thank you for your presence this morning. My question is a bit difficult for me to articulate, and I want to try to do it without taking up too much time, but it relates to the sort of debate that's an ongoing, probably forever in humanity, but between the significance of the subjective and the objective experience. And There was in the 60s some scientists doing some experiments with animals, and he was concerned about, because it was new, the Industrial Revolution and the abundance of food and goods and things, and he was concerned, like, what's going to happen psychologically to society when they have everything, their basic needs met. What's Because that's been their whole focus up until then, was just survival mostly. So what, and the animals, they became really obsessed with social status, to the point where that became their whole focus, and they even sacrificed their well-being and their health and their survival. In fact, in his experiments, he had to cut them short because they were going extinct. They were all dying off because of something he called behavioral sync, which was just a degeneration of society, so to speak, on the animal platform. But people argued against his conclusion, saying that humans do something more than just become obsessed with social status. They also become interested in things like social justice and improving the quality of relationships, not just the quality of physical survival and comforts. And one of the things that I've noticed is that as we become divorced from those physical basic necessities of nature, when we have an abundance of that stuff and we don't have to really worry about it, we kind of get into a bubble of consciousness that is based on what everybody believes. In our imagination, we have this view of the world, and it becomes substantiated. That's also some documented psychology, observations, that people will feel substantiated when they all believe the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. In fact, they'll, even facts presented to them, objective facts, they'll reject that if it means going against whatever, the status quo, what everyone believes, because they fear being outcasted or seen as weird. So they get so divorced from the reality of the world that, as we can see, our environment's suffering, and we're in danger of extinction, according to scientists, which is similar to what this scientist had predicted back in the 60s when he was doing these experiments. In terms of spiritual life, I feel like, yeah, we are pretty much seeing the world in our imagination, but at some point, if our philosophy helps us to shape our imagination, it helps us to shape our mind to a way that's appealing to Krishna. And then if he enters into that imaginary place, so to speak, to receive our love, then it becomes substantiated. Then the subjective becomes real, I guess you could say, in terms of feeling and heart and love, the relationships there. Then the kind of the details and the objectives matters less and less. But in in terms of practical life, how conscientious should we be about divorcing ourselves from, like, the realities of the world, and letting ourselves get in this bubble of just believing what everybody around us believes and not questioning it, fearing questioning it, and sort of abandoning critical thought, denying science or whatever, and just in the name of faith kind of living in this imaginary world while the relative real world crumbles around us. In spiritual life, I feel like maybe it would be healthier if we were more practical and more critical thinking, and like questioning those common beliefs. But
Uh-huh.
I wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, that's quite a question. Covered a lot of ground there. Hard to keep up with it all, but I'll try to reply to some of the themes there that you've mentioned. One thing I think, first of all, overall, is this subjective and objective perspective, and I think that the fact is that there is no such thing as a purely objective perspective. You can't get at the nature in its virgin state. You always have to you experience it through the filter of your, his own subjectivity. I'm sure that's what Immanuel Kant was saying, among other things. Um, um, and so that said, of course, a lot of things have been demonstrated to be, objectively, true and verifiable as much as to a greater extent than they were in pre-industrial, pre-scientific revolution times and so forth. And so this sense of objective reality has become so prominent that subjective reality has really been minimized and put on the back seat, if not dismissed altogether. If you can't demonstrate it objectively, then it's not true. So the things are a little out of balance in that regard. Pure subjectivity, idealism is not a philosophical perspective that is in favor at this time, but it's not something that's been, you can objectively, if you will, invalidate either. We overall, as transcendentalists, would give more credence to subjective reality than the objective reality. We would look at the objective reality coming out of the subjective reality. So like the physical world comes out of the mental world, if you will. The dominant perspective is the opposite. If there is a mental world at all, and everything's to be reduced to the physical. So we are more on the other side. We don't say there's no objective world, but there's something called matter, and it's rather magical. And how it shows itself, well, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So again, the subjective is kind of rules the day, so to speak. And so, there's just a thought about that in general. But as far as living in a spiritual bubble, I don't think that that's what we're really teaching, although maybe a lot of the devotees take it like that. The time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the time of the founding acharyas of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, they were very much aware of the world around them, what was taking place. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a social reformer. At the same time, he was giving an exemplifying a means to transcend the social and even religious world. He caused he led a protest against the Qazi and prevailed and so forth. And if you look at Chaitanya Charitamrita, you see that the participants, they're in Jagannath Puri. There's the king, Prataparudra Maharaj, he has his position. It's not that they were unaware of what was going on socially. There were invaders, Muslims who were mostly kept out of Puri, but they were conquering other Hindu kingdoms and so forth. Sanatana Goswami was employed by the Muslim government, and then he left and was imprisoned, and then he escaped and traveled incognito to avoid the government dressed himself like a Sufi, rather than as a Hindu. And so, I mean, they were the Goswamis in Vrindavan. They were dealing with different kings and getting their patronage, and thus their visions of Krishna Lila were honored, and monuments built, temples built to honor their visions and so forth. So they were, very much part of the world. I mean, transcendentalism, if you will, has really been pushed to the fringe in a modern materialistic society. So there may be a tendency just to step out of the world altogether, and live in a bubble, as you put it. There's a way to do that, I think, that is useful, but it's not something that everybody can do. Everybody who is a devotee, who's a card-carrying member of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. They have to work, they live, they have families, they live in the world, and they're interact with other people and their perspectives and so on and so forth. They're not living like renunciates in the forest. And even if you take, at least in our paribar, the renunciates tend to be teachers, and so they really, to be effective, they need to be aware of the world around them, the currents of thought and so forth. We see that in the Goswamis of Vrindavan. They were fully aware of the currents of thought in the principal philosophical systems of their time. And you can see that in their commentaries on the Bhagavatam and so forth. So while it's possible to be, an extreme recluse, and that's not possible for everybody. And so I don't think the teaching is necessarily that we should live in a bubble and not be concerned about the world around us. I mean, there's the other side of it, of changing the world. Yes, for an ultimate good that's transcendent to it, but in the context of that, making the world a better place and so forth. These themes are there in Chaitanya Vaishnavism from the very, very, very onset. So a devotee should be a critical thinker, and not hide his or her head in the sand. I made a comment about the political administration here for the first time after all these years on the internet, and Ganesh shared it with somebody, and then some godbrother said, well, at least you could be objective. And I didn't reply because, to have an opinion does not mean you're not being, or he said, at least you could be unbiased. It's not that having an opinion means that you're biased. You should have an opinion based on unbiased research of the facts. Research the facts without a bias, weigh them out, and come to an unbiased opinion. And it may be a strong one. So, that said, I mean, there's a fallacy that's, I guess you could say, that many religious people entertain, and devotees included, that spiritual life is something in which you don't have to think anymore, which is troublesome to sort things out, to come to what's the right, what's the wrong, and in any given instance, and that somebody else is going to now think for you. Just all the answers are there in the book. They just turn to page 108 and there's your answer. I mean, that's just not how it works. It's you have to think critically about your own tradition. You get within the bubble, if you will. You have, for example, there's some of my godbrothers or god sisters. There's a controversy of whether that's come about, whether the Jivatma comes to this world as a conditioned jiva, having originated in Vaikuntha or not. Well, the answer is not. But anyway, some of them just want to stick their head in the sand and say, well, I don't know. I don't know the answer. It's just, I don't want to think about it. Too much for me. That's not the best approach. Let's put it like that. And it's an emotionally driven kind of response that makes you, half of a person. Spiritual life is not to be half human. And a lot of devotees I see they're not quite fully human yet. They're devotees though, and there are animals that are devotees too. We have some here. So I'm sorry to say it, but it's true. They're not whole people. And if intelligence, as it's sometimes thought, and the measure of it that we find available in human society distinguishes us from less complex forms of life, then each of us has enough measure of intelligence. We're not all geniuses, least of all me, but we all are equipped with enough intelligence to rise above our emotions and make a decision based on information and that we measure and think critically about. The faculty of discrimination that is, I'm supposed to do something? No, it's fine. No, excuse me. Technical difficulties here.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Intelligence is our faculty of discrimination. So we all have enough, as I say, to rise above the an emotionally, a feeling, not well thought out, driven life. Again, animals are not like using that faculty, don't have the same measure of intelligence, so they're largely driven by feelings. Well, yes, we want feelings. We want transcendental feelings, and we want to use our intelligence spiritually to transcend the material, emotional life. So, yeah, I think that it's not that you have to tune into everything that's going on in the world, but sometimes the world around us speaks loudly and warrants that we have to, think about it and make a statement about it, take a position on it. There's the Vyavaharic reality and the Paramarthic reality, the empiric reality in which we live, and then there's the transcendent reality that we experience in our meditation, which is our goal to enter into. But what I think that look at persons like Bhakti Vinod, I mean, he was pretty well thought out on so many levels. That was his idea of a Saragrahi Vaishnava. It was actually a thinking, fully developed thinking person, critical thinker, if you will, who arrives at a transcendental, conclusion. So it depends on the scale, where we are at in our progress, the extent to which we can unplug from the world around us in a way that will actually foster our progress, or the extent to which we really are plugged into the world and need to participate in it from a Krishna conscious point of view in order to make progress. So
we shouldn't reject the scientific process, but we should use it to.
I mean, science is, you touch fire, it burns. You touch fire, it burns. She touches fire, it burns. Touch fire, it burns. That's science. I mean, how can you reject that? Now,
Well, a lot of
now,
our
now,
unity are.
now that said, every conjecture that arises out of examining data is not necessarily a fact. The data is one thing. How you interpret it and what conjectures you come up with as to what the significance of that data is, is an extension of what science is in a basic sense. So, for example, among scientists, there are different opinions based on different interpretations of the data. So one scientist says this, one scientist says that. They could be diametrically opposed. So on what level do we reject or accept science? That's another question.
Well,
but
scientific theory, and then there's a scientific process. I think those have to be seen separate.
Yeah, so they're different theories, and some of them are better than others. And new data may come and they may change and so forth. But that doesn't mean, oh, we reject science. Somebody gets on the computer, I don't believe in science. Well, you believe in computers?
Right.
And there's a lot of science to them. Science, and then put in the hands of technology. So it's kind of, what you see is that devotees reject science when it's not convenient for them, and they accept science when it's convenient, scientific conclusions when it's convenient for them. That's not critical thinking. That's just, an emotion-driven life. So, like look at the pandemic, and so scientists, what do they call them? The ones who have this field about, forget the name.
Virology.
Yeah, those guys. They say that masks, will reduce the spread, by 50%. So if we say, well, I don't believe in science. Prabhupada said, scientists were demons, Well, good luck with that. That's not a very well thought out idea. If you say, oh, I don't want to wear a mask, I should be free. That's like saying, why should I stop at red light? I should be free to drive as fast as I want. It's my car. It's ridiculous. So there's some pretty ridiculous ideas out there in the name of, not following scientists who are demons. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just a pathetic, state of affairs, largely amongst a good number of devotees, maybe the majority in the international community. And they're using their religion as an excuse to be idiots and not to think critically and not to be fully human even. And so things can be misapplied. Even good things can be abused. So those are some thoughts.
Hopefully that's helpful for all of us.
That's why I had written something. I objected to the idea. I saw these devotees, they were making this Mr. Trump like an avatar, like the God sent
They're actually worshiping him, doing puja and stuff.
person, and I objected to that. He's not one of the, innumerable avatars by any stretch of the imagination. And then, I mean, well, I could get into it, but and well, he's against abortion. Well, yeah, as of 2012, he was when he decided to, launch a political campaign and get the fundamentalist Christians on his side. And as far as the United States goes, by the way, if you were to make abortion federally illegal, it would be illegal in different states and illegal in some. It's still going to go on regardless. And by the way, there are less abortions being performed now than there were before abortion was illegal. So I mean, it's not just this black and white thing. One guy, what's his name, Biden, he's killing babies in the womb, and the other guy is the same. It's just not like that. These aren't well thought out things. If you want to live in a social secular democracy where you have freedom to be the religion that you of your choice, then you have to let other people have their choice of religion as well. Okay. And you have to have other people who have a choice not to be religious. So your moral compass, which is religious, is not necessarily the moral compass of everybody else. So, I mean, I live in the United States. I think it's morally wrong to drink alcohol and bad for you. But it's legal. I think it's wrong to kill cows, morally wrong, but it's legal everywhere. So there's a lot of things that are I'm allowed to choose not to do from a moral perspective that others are allowed to choose to do. And well, you might want to be different, but I would want to live in a fundamentalist Christian ruled nation, to be honest with you. I mean, what do you think they think about Hare Krishnas? I don't. You want a theocracy with Krishna consciousness, leading the way. Great idea. Good luck. It's not Tulsi Gabbard, who was a devotee who ran for, tried to become a presidential candidate. It's just silly to think, oh, she's going to be the president, therefore everything's going to, I mean, so I got my opinions about these issues, as you can be sure. Things are complex. I think there are overarching absolute goods and wrongs, and within either side, let's say of a political spectrum, there are minor rights and wrongs that are going on at the same time. And that's just, like I say, press down here, it goes up here. So that's the nature of the world. So there's some relativity to it, but some opinions are definitely better than others. Some things are definitely more right than others, more correct and better for people. So, yeah, it's an interesting discussions could be had, and I think devotees sometimes need to have opinions about issues in the world that are impacting them. And I think that if you look at the history of the great devotees in the Sampradaya, that they had opinions. And some of their opinions are, they may be relative to time and circumstance. And so for even Prabhupada's opinions, relative to the time and circumstance and the information available at the time. Prabhupada was suspect initially that people went to the moon. Well, that was like in 1960, whatever it was, it was quite a long time ago. It was a pretty far out idea, and there was a competition between the United States and Russia to who would get to the moon first. So it could have been, it's reasonable at that time to think maybe that, that was a hoax for a political ploy, and that's not unreasonable. But it'd be a little bit unreasonable now when they're putting a 4G network on the moon, Somebody I saw online said, Prabhupada believed in conspiracy theories. Therefore, it's good to believe in conspiracy theories. Well, Prabhupada believed in some things, relatively speaking, based on information he had. Yeah, that in time may be shown that those weren't accurate. He was a reasonable person. If he got new information, he would change his opinion. Prabhupada's not advocating that you believe in crazy, unfounded theories. Anyway, got to be sensible. To be a devotee, you got to be sensible. Got to have your 2 feet on the ground if you want to jump up and touch the stars. So, long answer to your long question. And that's that for tonight, for today, for this morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much, all of you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we'll be seeing you tomorrow again.
Tomorrow. Okay.
Yes, 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. And if the devotees could stay on for just a couple minutes, we have a couple of announcements to make. So, so the first announcement is tomorrow we're having Guru Maharaj will be speaking on Pujapad Shri Maharaj's Tirobhav at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. And the second announcement is next Sunday. We won't be having questions and answers, but we'll be having Guru Maharaj speaking on Govardhan Puja, and it will be the same time as our usual Sunday class. That class, they were testing out simultaneous translation with the Spanish, for the Spanish devotees. It seemed to go pretty well today. So tomorrow they'll be doing that as well. And we'll be recording also on Facebook tomorrow. I don't think it's going to mean that we're going to run out of spaces for people on Zoom, since the Spanish devotees will be getting on Padmanabha Swami's site. So, and then the other thing I just wanted to give is a seva opportunity for all the devotees. Many of you probably have heard or saw pictures of the damage that was done to Madhavan in this latest tropical storm that came through, where a lot of mudslides and roads and water pipes were quite damaged there. And because of COVID, their income has diminished quite a bit, because they depend on devotees coming and renting cabins and Airbnb and the Airbnb that they do as well. So it is Kartik, and any service we do during Kartik is magnified many times for our spiritual advancement. So if anybody feels that they're able to give a donation to Madhavan, it can be as small or as big as you want it to be. It will be greatly appreciated. You can do that. The email that you can send a PayPal donation is daljigopal@madhavan.net. And that's also going to be on Facebook on Sri Chaitanya Sangha if you need that address. So I thank everybody for your participation today. We had some very nice questions. We didn't get to everybody's questions, but the devotees who didn't get their questions answered, it looks like because then the 22nd also we'll be doing a class on Sunday after Gopastami. So it won't be, we won't have questions and answers again until the 29th of November. I hope to see everybody tomorrow and for some of the other special days coming up. All right, Jai, Hare Krishna.